Welcome back, SBS students. Thank you for joining us. We are having a very interesting week this week where we have our guest speakers at the Super Seers Conference. And so we have Gabriel and Louise Lopez, as well as, you can woo if you want. We have Gary Oates with us, and we have our own Karen Hannah Welton with me as well. You got the biggest woo. They were just getting warmed up. So yes, we're going to do something interesting today. We have my media director, Sarah Johnson, is going to be asking some questions. And so we'll have a Q&A session this afternoon. And we have already put out our questions. So we have a list of questions. And Sarah will guide us through them, and they're going to be individualized. We're going to start actually with Karen because we have our baby Hannah with us at the moment, who is about 5 months old. And so Karen is going to go first. She's going to do all her questions, and then she's excused to go take care of Hannah and whatever needs to be done. So we're letting you go first to make it easy and practical. So take it away, Sarah.
Sounds good. So Karen, what did you think when you first found out that Jonathan was a seer?
I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I was like, you can see in the spirit? What? What's happening right now? I think we were in high school and we were dating at the time when he had that gift sort of downloaded to him, and he shared with me in youth group one day, and I was like, really? And it was during worship, and there was all this activity going on, and I was like, so what's happening right now? What are the angels doing? What's it look like? And I don't think he was expecting that, because he was still shell-shocked from the experience, and I was all eager to ask him 101 questions, and so I don't know what he expected my reaction would be, but I just was fascinated with what he was seeing, and I would always ask him.
That's awesome. So you see too, is that right? Are you a seer as well?
I don't see the way he sees. I wouldn't call myself a seer. I have seen in the past or gotten impressions of angels or seen it in my mind's eye, kind of like Gary talked about. And my gift has grown as I've been married to him, and as we've been doing these trainings, I've recognized more and more how I do see and given more credit to what I was seeing, whereas before I would just dismiss it as, oh, that's just my imagination. And so I think I have acknowledged more things that the Lord has been showing me in that realm, but I wouldn't consider myself a seer, or that I can just kind of flip it on and off whenever I want. It doesn't work that same way for me.
So how is a specific way that your gift has grown in being in relationship with Jonathan by being married to him?
Yeah, kind of what I just said, as far as giving myself being more aware of when I was picking up on something in the spirit realm, and realizing that it wasn't necessarily the way he would describe, like I wasn't seeing something with my physical eyes, but it was more in my imagination, and I felt like I kind of had insider information being married to a seer, so I would sometimes test it out and say, okay, is there an angel over there? And he'd say, yes. And I was like, awesome. And he'd say, well, what's it wearing? And I was like, I don't know. and then I'd have to look again, and I'd be like, silver. He's like, yes. And what else? And I'm like, blue. No, purple. So we would sort of test it out, and I got to figure out a little bit more that I really was seeing, and give myself credit for that. I remember one activation in a school a lot like this, where I think he's going to do the activation tonight, where we sort of are able to step into the spirit realm and see what's going on and test those giftings. I felt a fountain in the corner of a room, and I asked him, is there a fountain or a waterfall over there and a pool? And he's like, yeah, there is. Do you know what color it is? And I thought it was just water, blue water. And then I looked again in my mind, and I saw, oh, it's like silver and gold and sparkly. So I sort of learned to develop my gifting over time. Really just, I think everyone has that latent ability as a Christian to use their imagination, and that the Lord speaks to us through our imagination. And I think so many other people, like I did, just sort of blew it off and thought it was just our imagination, or you were just making it up. But really, the more we put stock into that, the more he begins to speak to us through that avenue. So that's how I've learned to grow at being married to him, realizing, oh, this is really God speaking to me, kind of like when he speaks audibly, or it's not an audible voice that we hear like my friend's Hannah's voice, like talking to me. It's just that still quiet voice, like it sounds like your own thoughts. So I think seeing is the same way. It sounds like or looks like your own imagination sometimes.
That's awesome. So how long have both of you been married?
9 years.
Congratulations.
Don't look at.
So what kind of challenges have you seen Jonathan encounter in his seeing gifting since y'all have been married?
Since we've been married 9 years. So the whole time we've been married, he's been seen in the Spirit, and it's maybe been 10 or 11 years since he's had the gift, since I've known him. And I knew him when he got the gift. So I've seen, especially since he has been on TV, on the Sid Roth show, he'll get a lot of people that come up to him at conferences or emailing him and saying, what do you see on me? And they sort of make him out to be like a rock star, like you are just your gift. And that's the only way that I'll see you, is you're a seer and you see things. So you should discern something about me and help me fix all my problems in my life. And people sort of have that expectation. And I think for a while it really jaded him. And he just didn't want to operate in that gifting at all. And he didn't want to teach on it, and he didn't want to talk about it, and he kind of shut down. And I've seen him get frustrated when people only see him for that as a seer, and they don't really go any deeper than that, and they think that he can solve all their problems. When people elevate him onto this pedestal and say, you must be some super spiritual prophet, because you have this extra ability, it's sort of, it's hard for him to know how to interact with someone. And so I've seen that be a challenge for him to learn how to steward the gift and walk with people in their brokenness, or help them to step into the gift themselves. Sometimes it's kind of like, I don't know if he feels used, if that makes sense, but used for the gift, instead of someone who comes to him, in humility and says, I really want to learn how to do this, and takes the tools because that's why he wrote the book, The School of the Seers, so that all Christians could learn how to see in the Spirit, that it's not just some super spiritual person up on the stage that gets to do it all. And I think when people see him that way, it's just sort of the opposite of what he's trying to do in the body of Christ, because he wants everyone to be released in this gift.
That's a good answer. That was all I have for you, so you can...
All right.
Baby time.
I'm gonna add a question to that too. Well, we came up with the questions, ourselves to really try to give some personal side to things for the students. And so now, since we have a 5-month-old, and so you've gone through the 9 months of pregnancy and now 5 months with an infant, how in our household, and I have no idea how you're going to answer this, but because of the way we walk and the things we believe and the things we've experienced, could you share from the 9 months of being pregnant and then the 5 months? So 2 answers of things the Lord's shown you, or understandings, things maybe you've seen something, or a perspective that's shifted because you have this little baby that we believe sees angels and can't yet form words. Just whatever you want to share there would be awesome.
So how has that impacted the pregnancy and how since she's been born? Okay. So the pregnancy I'd have to think more about. My pregnancy was very supernatural, and my birth was supernatural, in that I didn't experience pain, and the whole thing had so much grace on it. And I really believe a lot of that was because I developed a connection with Hannah, my daughter, before she was born. And I just believe she was just as alive in my womb as she is once she was born, and that her spirit existed with God before she came to me. And I would kind of treasure a lot of those words that were spoken over her. I felt like she had a personality. I would talk to her, I would pray over her, I would sing to her. She knew she was loved and wanted, and I developed a connection with her, and I was intentional about walking in peace. And if I got stressed out or fearful, I would break that off. And I really believe that attributed to a lot of how the pregnancy and the birth went. I just felt like there was such a connection there. The Lord really taught me throughout the whole pregnancy about that spiritual connection. Like someone was talking about the umbilical cord this weekend and how we're connected physically with an umbilical cord, but we're also connected in a spiritual cord. And I think we're connected that way to when we open our hearts to people. So I have a cord between me and Jonathan in the spirit, and we're connected, and my heart is open to him, and I'm connected to God the Father. And there's like this spiritual connection into Jesus, and we can break that connection without intending to, or we can open our hearts to that connection again. And so often, we just through getting busy or life, we can forget about that there's a Jesus, the person, or my husband or my kids. And so I was very intentional about having that connection, and I would imagine things in the spirit, and a lot of what I would do activating the spirit realm would be just imagining her in my womb. I would imagine her growing up. I would imagine my birth and what it felt like and what it looked like and the peace surrounding it. I would imagine the angels surrounding me, and I would activate the spirit realm around me and imagine what was happening with her. I would pray for specific things. I prayed that she'd be very easygoing. I prayed for her eye color. I prayed she'd have beautiful hair. I prayed for like 100 things, and I got pretty much all of them and beyond what I could imagine. It says ask above and beyond it. He'll give you above and beyond what you can imagine. And so the Lord answered every prayer. And from the beginning, I knew it would just be supernatural. And so there's this connection I have with her that I know she feels secure in my love and in my arms. I know she feels secure in the Father's love because, I feel like I'm not waiting for her to have a relationship with Jesus. She already knows God. She lived with God in heaven. Her spirit was alive. One person said, she's really happy that you get to be her parents. It was like she chose us in heaven to come to earth and have us be her parents. And so I just imagined this life that she had in heaven before she came to be with us. Even during the birth, I was imagining what was happening in my body and to my body, and I believed that my body was created to do this, and it wasn't created with defects. I think so often we get told in America that birth is traumatic and painful, and I could go on a whole tangent about this, but I just believe that God designed it perfectly, and I would imagine everything that would happen during birth in me, and it did, and it wasn't painful, even though I experienced everything that a normal birth would happen. Every stage was normal. So
I'll add some confirmation to that too, because throughout the 9 months, the first, for most people, the first 10 to 12 weeks is when you have, the most transition of the hormones and the morning sickness and the whole deal, or the all the time sickness, or so that's like the real challenging part. And early on, it was kind of challenging there. There was some of that, and Karen asked my dad to pray for her, which he's got a really strong healing gift. It's just incredible. And so he prayed for her, and from there, through the rest of the pregnancy, it was just tremendous. It was healthy and peaceful, and she felt great most of the time. And then even the delivery, I can say as a witness there that it wasn't any different than what she's describing. I mean, we did a completely all natural at home birth with midwives and doulas, and I did not grow up that way, so it was really very different for me to say yes, let's do that. Hospital sounds more safe. Whether it is or not is debatable, but it sounds more safe when you're American. So for me, it was a shift, but it was really 4 hours of labor, and even in the middle of some of the rough spots, Karen's like laughing, and she's like, "This is so much fun," and the midwife is looking at me going, "I've never seen this before." And even when they're done, the midwife has told us, like, "I've never seen a first-time mom like that before." So this was over the top. I mean, it's more than what you're hearing. And even in it, too, I would add too that, we would have arguments here and there, and so it was, I think, only 3 times in the whole course of the 9 months that we really had some arguments, like every 3 months or so. And I don't even have a clue what they're about, but what I thought was interesting is that after we were done, we were like, okay, all right, I'm sorry, you're sorry, everything's closing up. But it wasn't just 2 people coming back together. It was then, putting my hand on Karen's belly, and then we're both saying, we're sorry, Hannah, and Mommy and Daddy love each other, and there's there's nothing wrong, and treating her as if she's already there, not just, separate somewhere else. And so, reaffirming, like, this is a peaceful house, you're okay, there's nothing wrong here, and reaffirming that. And I mean, anybody who's interacted with her knows, it's just an incredible personality. And she's been sleeping through the night early on since like 8 weeks or something crazy. So it's been incredible. And I think too, a lot of it is ignoring all the dumb word curses that people like to say. Oh, pregnancy's so hard, and then, oh, delivery's so hard. Oh, and then they don't sleep, you must not be sleeping. Oh, just wait till she's 2. Just wait till she's a teenager. Just shut up. Like get behind me with your advice. It's crazy, the stuff we're saying. How do we sound any different than the world? Like, where does the supernatural come in? Is it only at church, or is it in your every little detail of your life?
Yes.
So we gotta not throw that on people. Maybe you had a bad experience, but it doesn't have to be shared. We can encourage people that, take this testimony and share it.
Yeah.
So Karen's, actually being trained now to be a doula, which is a birth coach, and is, so excited to have the opportunity to help other moms walk through this with some faith and without fear. And so answer my other question about after she was born.
Okay. Well, let me just say quickly that I think even more that the more I reflect on my birth, the more I realize how joyful it was. And I think part of that is just the way God designed it, with the release of the endorphins and the oxytocin that happens during birth when you're not afraid. It totally blocks the pain receptors, and it creates this spiritual high that I've never had before. And I think that really imprinted her, because she's one of the most joyful babies I've ever seen. So I think birth can be joyful and pain-free and a beautiful experience. So for all the young women in here, take that and believe for it, because it really is possible. So for her, next question. There you go, just take it. I just bless you to have that. And it was a little more than 4 hours. 4 hours was probably the active labor, but I did say in my head at one point, I'm having fun. It's really happening. It's really working. I can't believe it. And I was like, if I don't say this out loud, I'm not going to believe myself. So I was like, I'm having fun. So yeah, it was a wonderful experience. It was very intense, but very beautiful. And so while she's been born, second question, she has, I know all kids, all babies see in the spirit. I just know that, because they come from that realm, and we kind of have to teach them not to see and not to trust their imagination. So I just assumed that she did. And I would nurse her in a little part of our bedroom that kind of stuck off to the side, and I'd play worship music there for the first month or two. And there was such a presence in there. I just remember I was bonding with her and connecting with her in that atmosphere of love and joy and worship with the Lord. And I remember one day she was crying, just crying her eyes out, and she was tired or hungry. I don't know what the situation was. And I was super exhausted, because those first few weeks, you're just exhausted no matter what. You're learning how to do this thing, and that's just what it is. And I remember saying, I knew there were angels in that room, in that area. And I was like, angels, can you please help me? Can you help Hannah, just to help her with whatever she needs? Can you please help her? And all of a sudden she stopped crying, like in a moment, and started looking around the room like this. And I was like, thank you. So now I really do utilize them. I was like, can you entertain her for just a little while? And I just picture angels like throwing balls back and forth across the room and making funny faces at her, and I think she interacts with them all the time. There was one point where I had her, near the dining room table, and she kept looking to one side of the room, and I was like, there's got to be an angel there. And so I asked Jonathan, is there an angel right there? Because she keeps looking there. It happened several times. And he was like, yeah, there is. And he didn't share with me at first, but later, I kind of poked him a little bit, and he wasn't ready to share. But then later that day, he kind of shared with me and said, that's the angel that I had for years when he first got the gifting to be a seer. And he knew his name, and he was a very talkative angel. And I just realized that this weekend, actually, no wonder she's so talkative. Her angel is this very talkative angel, and he knows who he is because he was his angel before he got a new one. And it was just so touching to see how the Lord did that. I believe that she knows the Lord, and she knows Jesus, and she sees the angels, and I feel like I don't have to teach her that. I just have to affirm it. So I'll ask her all the time, what do you see over there? What's going on? Do you like this person? Oh, do you see their angel? Or, oh. And I want to make it normal for her, like Louise talked about, that this is normal and that she can be raised in that environment to know God, and that God isn't someone that when you're 12 years old, you say a prayer and now you're a Christian. I think she can just live in that relationship from a young child. Yeah. So that's sort of how we want to raise her in that environment.
Well, Karen, you're welcome to stay. You're welcome to excuse whenever if you want, but you're welcome to stay right here. You're free. And let's have a round for Karen. So let's start down with Gabe, and we'll come this way.
All right. Gabriel, what did you think when you first found out that Louise was a seer? What was the experience? What happened in this situation?
What did I first think, you say?
Mm-hmm.
What did I first think? Well, I found out about Louise and her story and stuff like that when I was in first year school ministry at Bethel, and actually the first time I ever, it's kind of a funny story. So we met we started dating at some point in third year. So this is years before. This is when we were in first year, and I remember hearing the story up front, and I heard vaguely some of the details about the wakey story, and I'm like, oh, I remember that story, and now I get some of the clarification, and we go through the story in the class, and Benny Johnson was sharing, and I turn around, and she's sitting right behind me in the school, and I stand up and I say, hi, my name is Gabriel, blah blah blah. Would you pray for me? I just want you to release, just that over my life and everything that you carry, and she prayed for me, but the prayer was like 5 seconds long, and then she took off. I didn't know, but she had a crush on me at the time, so find out later on that she ran off, and I was like, what just happened? Okay. I remember I was like this, and I opened my eyes, and she was gone. So I was like, I'm just gonna take it that I received it, and so we didn't actually start really meeting and hanging out until about second year. And whole God story. I remember I was in second year retreat, and I was in worship, and I was just in this moment of, Jesus, I love you so much, and oh God, you're the best thing ever. And then all of a sudden I heard the Lord say, and then her last name was Watkins at the time, her maiden name. He said, you were going to know Louise Watkins. I heard the voice very clear, and the only history we had was that one moment, and this is a year after, and I was like, the wakey girl kind of thing. Like I didn't know why, and the Lord had begun to start to speak to me about seeing and stuff like that. So I assumed maybe we're going to reconnect at some point and just be able to talk a little more than that 10 seconds. And I get home from the retreat, and my best friend, my roommate at the time, he was saying, hey, do you want to go get some food? And I said, yeah. And he's like, my friend's going to come. Her name's Louise. Do you know her? And this is literally the next day. And I said, and I was already like, oh, okay, I see what God's doing here. Just kind of like, the pieces are falling into place. And we met, and we started hanging out. And, if you've heard any of the stories so far, you might think they're crazy and they're insane and amazing and profound. And but hearing them in person and just she's holding back a lot just of the I don't even know how to describe it. And so I remember just sitting there and hearing these stories and being like, okay, that's normal, everything you're sharing. And she was like, yeah, and then, this angel did this, and this did that, and traveling in the spirit, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, totally, I experienced that, yeah. And I remember just being like, what? And then so we started hanging out, but it was kind of interesting because a lot of the seeing questions weren't as talked about anymore, but then we started getting to know each other as friends, and then, we were friends for a while, and this girl's actually pretty fun. We were playing Xbox together, doing things that had nothing to do with seeing whatsoever, and just hanging out, and so it was interesting getting to know her during that time of, there's these seeing things that happened, but at the same time I was, liking her at the same time. I didn't want to say anything at first, but just enjoying our friendship that we had, and a few years later we started dating. But it was interesting in the beginning of just kind of hearing some of the stories, and I think I totally agree with what Karen was saying, that sometimes people can see or hear the stories and just kind of almost unknowingly put a label and be like, oh, they're the seer, and it's great that they're coming and they're honoring and they're getting prayer and stuff like that, and that's important and that's needed, but at the same time there's so much more to the person, and there's so much beauty there and amazing things there under the surface that it's almost like the mystery of God to hide these beautiful things, and he puts this amazing gift, but behind that is even more amazing things, greater than all this thing. That's only a part of the puzzle, of the masterpiece, so to speak. And so it was fun getting to know her in that sense, because it taught me a lot about the heart of God and getting to know him. Sometimes we're seeking the Lord for a certain one thing, and we're always pressing in for one certain area of our life, whether it be the prophetic or sing or whatever. And it's interesting when you, down the line, you find out there's so much more to God than that one thing. That's just one part, and that's a great part, and he wants you to have that one part. But the best part is always the heart of God, and with that comes everything. And so it was an interesting journey for me to find that out. Just kind of learn that over time, and I learned a lot through that. So.
That's awesome. Now, Louise, I have a question for you now about guardian angels. Do we all have them, and what are your thoughts on them? And you can kind of elaborate on that.
Well, guardian angels, what do I think about that? I know that everyone has angels that are assigned to them, but I think a lot of the times, people say, for me, I have two angels that have been with me, one since I was 5, and then one since, I don't remember when he came. I've asked him, and he says he doesn't know. And I'm like, you're lying to me because you do know, but I think he's not telling me for some reason. And I'm like, okay, I'm ready for whenever you want to tell me, but no, I think people have angels that are assigned to their life for different purposes and for different things that they're called to do. But I think a lot of times that changes too. So it makes sense of how, Karen was saying with Jonathan, he had this angel that was with him at the beginning, and then it got switched out and became this different angel. So I think with guardian angels, a lot of the time, they can switch out and they can change up depending on what season of your life you're in and where God is taking you. And I feel like a lot of times too, I remember I had one angel for just a few months during this one season, and then they just disappeared and I've never seen them again. So I think with guardian angels, God given to us just to be there to for certain giftings or for certain things. One of my angels, his name is Jason, and when he first told me that, I was like, that's interesting. And then I looked it up and it's to do with healing. I was like, I don't really feel like I'm going to have a healing ministry. And he's like, I'm here for you because you're going to heal people's eyes. So you're going to be your ministry. And I was like, that's really interesting. And it just really confirmed what I wanted to do. I was like, I want to heal people's eyes even before we really talked about his name and what it meant and everything. So I think that guardian angels a lot of time they're there to partner with you in what God has called you to do. And they're there to align, God sends them to align themselves with you, and they carry the certain things that you need, in that moment or in that season.
Awesome. And next is Gary. How does a person know the difference between their imagination and a real vision? Because I know you spoke some on that earlier, so...
Okay, what is the difference between the imagination and seeing visions? Is that the question?
How does a person know the difference between knowing it's his imagination or knowing that it's a real vision from the Lord?
Well, you have to understand the definition of imagination. The imagination is simply the forming of mental images. The imagination is that which is activated in seeing a vision. So they're one and the same. I was taught that the imagination is evil, don't go there. The imagination can be evil, but it can also be very good. It's a God-given mechanism for us to be able to see on the screen of our mind. It's God-given. We all have it. We're all born with it. We can sanctify it. We can focus our imagination on the things of the Spirit of God and have more visions from God and dreams from God. But when we see a dream, when we have a vision, when we're seeing in the Spirit, it's actually the activation of our imagination.
That's an awesome answer. Jonathan is next.
I'll add a thought and then I'll take the question.
Awesome.
One of the biggest questions I get so often is, how do I know if it's me or the Holy Spirit? And I've come to the point of, it doesn't matter. So often we're trying to divide it up, but we don't see that question in Scripture. None of the apostles are saying, is that me or is that the Holy Spirit? Now, Paul actually writes and says that those who are joined to the Lord are one spirit with him. So what you are saying, it sounds like me, the Holy Spirit sounds like you because he's merged with your human spirit. So there's a merging there and it's going to sound like you. That's actually, and I've never heard anyone else say this, but you guys probably would agree that that's how I know an angel's talking, because an angel is outside of you. They have their own voice. They can even have their own accent, and they talk to you in a way that sounds, it's in your spirit, but it sounds unlike you. It's outside of you. But when the Holy Spirit's talking to me, it sounds like me because he's joined my spirit. So that's one way that I discern, is that the Holy Spirit or is that an angel? But the real question is that the Holy Spirit and my human spirit, or is that the flesh? That's what people are really trying to ask. And the flesh is not telling you to go be a missionary. The flesh is not telling you to go serve the Lord in this way or this way. And so often we're asking really dumb questions, essentially. Like, is the devil trying to get me to go do a crusade in Africa? No, he's not. Sorry. That's either you or the Holy Spirit, and you don't have to divide that up because God doesn't. The two have become one. That's what this whole deal is about. So, and you guys, any thoughts to add on that? Because that's an important one.
Yeah, I can. It's the Sid Roth becoming naturally supernatural. It becomes a lifestyle. It's the way that we are. It's the way that we exist. It's the way that we live, with the way that we move. And I was reminded when you were saying that, Paul said he didn't know, he said, whether in the body or out of the body, I don't know. And some people say, well, what do you mean you don't know? Well, the reason he said that is because when he went up into the third heaven, it was so real that, like, he was literally there. I mean, he was there. And so, but he was, his earthly physical body was still here on the earth. So he didn't go physically. But it's so real, you feel like you are literally actually there. Okay? And so that can become a lifestyle to us, where we are living in that arena with the Spirit throughout the day.
Awesome.
Very good. So Jonathan, I know that we have a lot of leaders in-house here as well as watching through the Bible school. So when a prophetic vision is given to, let's say, you as a leader, what are the steps that you would take to do when you were given that vision, such as how to proceed towards it or how to inspire the congregation to move towards it in ways like that? How would you go about doing that?
That's an interesting one for me because the Lord's put me in a position that I'm not a leader of a local congregation, and so I don't often have to be in that position myself. But training people in the prophetic, they are going to go back to their own churches. They're going to get words. They're going to get visions. They're going to have things they want to share. And then the local leadership is going to have to hear those words and consider how to share them, should they share them. And really, I do believe that the local church leadership needs to be honored and respected in submitting words and then having them share at the right time in the right way, because they have a much bigger vision of what's going on. As an individual, we can think this is the most important thing, I just got a word, but this is where the spirit of the prophet is subject to the prophet. So you are the one who's able to go and say, look, here's what the Lord showed me, and they can decide what to do with it and the right timing. Now, if you're finding you're in a situation that is constantly ignoring, disregarding, disrespecting the prophetic in what you're hearing, you need to take that back to the Lord, because one, it could be that you're in a refining process where you need to keep learning, and it may not be accurate words at this point. And you may need to sit down with the leader and say, look, I've given you 20 words, you've never shared any, I'm not coming out of offense, but can you help me understand, am I right? Am I getting anything right? Is it way off, or what's going on here? And it may be a learning thing. On the other side, you may be in a situation where they say, we're just not open to it. We're never going to share your words. All 20 are perfect and accurate, but we're never going to share them. Well, that's a whole nother situation. And you're going to have to decide, and prayerfully for yourself, do I continue in this atmosphere? Am I called to be here to change it? And can I do that respectfully without being dishonoring? Because lots of people stay in bad environments to try to change them, and they become very dishonoring, and that's not going to help anything. So if every one of these questions, what I'm really saying is, it's a process that you have to keep taking to the Lord in humility. Is this the Lord? Is this accurate? Are you willing to share it? If it's not because you're against prophecy, maybe I need to grow some more. So it's a really hard question to answer, because it could go down about 10 different avenues. So that's kind of my general thought on it.
My next question is for Gabriel, and it's one that I asked Karen already. How has your gift grown in seeing by being in relationship with Louise through your dating and your new marriage?
That's a fun journey. Because it's never what you think it's going to be like. It's sometimes, let's see, where do I begin? I guess I can begin where we first met. We met when we were friends, obviously, and I had loads of questions. I'm like, so you see angels right now? Like, we're in and out, we're in this burger joint, and we're just sitting there talking, and you see an angel right now? Yes. Okay, let me just let that settle in right there. Let's start right there. Let that sink in. Okay. Question number 2. And I just went on from there. So at first it started just by being curious, and there's nothing wrong with being curious, because there's a gift release. So and the point of that is to release understanding. And so I was seeking understanding. And understanding, if done in the right way, will always lead you to hunger. And if you grow that hunger, it leads you to activation. And a lot of people, they don't get to activation. They go back to trying to get more understanding. And if done in the wrong way, then you can be dependent on the gift or the person. You know what I'm saying? And so it's someone who's constantly saying, well, what do you see? What do you see? What do you see? I think there's a point when the person says, well, what do you see? What do you see in the room? And that's the point where the gift starts to almost be transferable. Impartation is great. The laying on of hands is great. Praying, prophesying, all that is so needed. But there's some things released in just the faith, stepping out. And there's impartation in that, because you're with the person. There's that covering. There's that trust. And you can start operating in the gift that the person is walking in. And so, as we started being just friends and just getting to know each other more, little things started happening now and then, and it was always so funny, because I'd always be praying for these encounters and seeing angels, and nothing would happen. And it would never be when I was praying, and it would always be when I was not expecting it. I could be walking down a hallway, or I'd be eating something, or I'd be just in church, and I'd be looking at the speaker, and I would see something would happen, and things like that. I remember one time, we were studying. We were like reading this book just for school. This is in our second year, and we were in my house, and the door was closed behind me. And we were just sitting there, and she was reading something, and I saw this with my open eyes. I saw this light on her arm just start to like appear, and I thought someone was coming to the front door. I thought the door was opening behind me because it just looked like like light was coming in. And so I naturally just leaned back and I looked behind me to see who was coming in the front door. No one was there. The door was closed. And I remember turning, and I was so confused. The last thing in my mind was thinking I'm seeing something in the spirit. And so there's so much grace. If God can show me things, trust me, he can show you things. Because I sat there and I'm like, I just did not get it. And I remember sitting there going, someone was at the door. And she said, what did you see? I remember vividly. She was like, what did you see? And I didn't get that because I was thinking of the front door. And I'm like, what? And she said, you saw something on my arm. And I'm still did not get it. Like, this is how slow the process is working right now. And I'm just staring at her, and she said, you saw something. She's like, I felt something on my arm, but I didn't see it. You saw something on my arm. And then it started to sink in what was actually happening. I was seeing something in the spirit. I'm like, oh my God. So things like that, there's so much grace in it. For some reason, for me, it always happened when I wasn't expecting it. One time, she was just coming over to hang out, and I was at my house, and I remember I was watching iBethel TV, and I was watching someone preach. It was just like a Friday night service, whatever, and I was laying down on my bed just watching it, and just Louise was kind of just walking to my house, and I remember and I fell asleep, and I woke up maybe 10, 15 minutes later, and I wake up on my bed, and I noticed that I was still watching this, and I see this hand in the corner of my eye just waving at me. Waving, like, just so fast. And then my first thought was, what is Louise doing in my room? What is she doing in my room? And because I was just so tired, as the first thought popped in my head, and the hand just disappears into thin air. And I remember, you jump up, and I'm looking around, the door's closed, the lights are off in my room, and I'm just like, who's in here? Kind of thought, like, who's there? And so things started happening to me, and it was, again, it was always when I wasn't expecting it. And for me, I can't say this is for how it's going to be for everybody. There are certain people that it happens like that. And I've seen that, and that's amazing. But for me personally, it began when I wasn't expecting it. And I know for me what that taught me was, because if the Lord started encountering me in the times of my pressing in and my hungering after the Lord for hours and hours and hours and diving into the Bible and just trying to, then if he would have met me there, it would have only pushed me into performance. It would have taught me that when I perform, there's a reward. And so the Lord was waiting for me literally to do nothing, and I was walking down a hallway or, waking up from a nap or, daydreaming or whatever, and things would happen, and he was like, I'm only going to meet you here until you realize that it's not what you do, it's a gift that you receive, and then I'll start meeting you anywhere. And for me, it was a blessing in disguise. You get frustrated when those things happen because you're praying for hours, wasting your time. If it's coming out of performance, it's useless. It's just a bunch of words that are coming out, and there's not love behind it. It's just performance, and you can't earn it. And the Lord's just trying to pull you, and He's so patient. He's so patient. And that's one of the things I learned, and that was years ago. And so there's definitely been a growth and a process, and now there's, that's why these activations that we do after every service have been so powerful. They work. Like, I promise you, they work. If you don't see and you're discouraged, you think you're discouraged? Try being married to someone who is encountering these things all the time, and you're trying to grow in these things, and you're trying to have a heart for the Lord, and the Lord is just pouring out hunger on you. And you are having to be like, oh, and you're getting so hungry for it. And that's good. The Lord is stirring something up inside of you. And I'm like, okay, Lord, everyone has their own journey. And I'm going to grow in the way I'm going to grow. Because the Lord doesn't mess up. And so that's the way He did for me. And it's an always a growing process. And there's times where I see things with my spirit. There's times where I've seen things with my open eyes. There's times where I have crazy dreams. And it's all because you just trust the Lord in His daily steps in the journey. So.
That's very good. Louise, you see all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so do you understand everything you see when you see it?
Oh, nope. Some stuff I see and I'm like, what? What is that? What is going on? Like, I would say the majority of the stuff that I see, I really don't understand. And I will literally have to sit there, and sometimes I'll just stare at an angel for like 10 minutes, and I'm like, and sometimes they're like, stop staring at me. And I'm like, I'm trying to understand you. And they're like, oh, it's impossible. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Fantastic. Thank you. But I love when I don't understand something that I see. Because for me, it shows me that God that can show me anything. And he's not worried about, oh, she's not going to understand this, so she's going to freak out and push it away. And also because it just takes me right back to God. And I have to go to him and I have to be like, okay, I really don't understand this. Like, I really don't know why this angel did this. What is going on? Like, what does this mean? What does that mean? And then I'm able to then develop my relationship with God because I'm having to talk to him because I don't understand what's going on. And there's still, like, to this day, like, so many encounters that I've had that I'm like, I don't know why that happened. I have absolutely no idea what was going on. Like, I shared that one the other day at the conference when I saw all these angels in the sky blowing trumpets. And I remember thinking, Jesus is coming back, like something is going on right now, because I was just so freaked out. And still to this day, you know, I was about 13 when that happened, like 13, 14. I don't know why that happened still. But it's like everything that I see that I don't understand, I'm like, wow, I feel really honored to see this, even though I don't understand it. And I know that one day God might give me understanding, one day he might not. But that's okay, because I'm seeing it, and that is the important thing. And the important thing is that it's just leading me straight back to God. So
That is good. Gary, I know that you have a lot of activations that you do with different people and teaching and things like that. So what are some of your teaching strategies, if you will, to help others exercise their spiritual senses, and kind of elaborate on that? So if we were to, run across someone and wanted to walk through one with them or something.
That's a real good question. The activation of our spiritual gifts and our spiritual senses, excuse me, are very similar, because in the gifts of the Holy Spirit, you have to avail yourself to God manifesting that gift through you. And sometimes God will speak to us and we'll bottle up on it. We won't do it. God will move on to somebody else who will. It's available for everyone. It's the same with our spiritual senses, activating our spiritual senses, which is becoming mainly the focus of these sessions that I do. When people realize that just as we have 5 physical senses, we have 5 spiritual senses that correspond. And won't take time to go into all the teaching on that, just believe that. But we're so accustomed to living in our natural physical senses and an awareness of the natural physical world that we have put our spiritual senses on the back burner. Half the time we don't even realize that we have them, and we don't have a clue about how to activate them. So just walking through a simple process of yielding ourselves to the Lord and going through, just as, we have physical sight, so we have spiritual sight. And it's giving over our physical sight in order to activate our spiritual sight, so to speak, if that makes sense. Okay, the same with our hearing. So we say, God, I give you my eyes, Lord, my physical eyes. I want to activate my spiritual sight. Okay? And as we do that, then we begin to have visions. We begin to actively participate in what God's wanting to reveal to us. It's the same with our ears. We have natural physical hearing, so that we have spiritual hearing as well. That we can literally hear the voice of God. And sometimes I've heard the voice of God so loudly that I thought it was audible. And I thought everybody else heard that. It was so strong, but nobody else heard it. It was the activation of my spiritual hearing. The same with the sense of smell. Just as we have natural physical smell, we have spiritual smell, where we can smell the fragrance of the Lord, we can smell the smells of heaven. We're actively engaged in all of our senses in what God is doing. The same with our taste. We can literally taste and see that the Lord is good. And of course, the taste and the smell, go together in a very real way. But we have feelings also. We have that touch. Where in the natural, we have natural feeling. Well, in the spirit realm, we have that ability to feel the embrace of the Father, to feel the manifestation of the angel as he would brush up, or as he would, put his hand on your head or on your shoulder. In fact, many of you have had that experience where you felt somebody touching you and you looked and nobody was there. That's the activation of your spiritual sense of feeling. And so just by practicing these things, Hebrews 5:14, through practice, we have our senses trained. And so the more that you practice these, the more that you actually do it, the more easy you flow in the things of the Spirit.
Awesome. And Jonathan, this is kind of
Let me ask Gary a question, and then I'll take my question. We wanted to have the spouses in on this panel, and I know Gary's wife, Kathy. Love Kathy. She's so sweet, and she's not able to be here with us at this event. So would you just, in whatever words you think Kathy might share, as far as, I know that when everything started 11 years ago, you guys were pastors in Florida of a vineyard, and you were pretty tired at that point, right? It was kind of tired with a lot of ministry stuff, and then this experience happened. The shift for you, how was it for Kathy? If you could try to help us put it into words from how she might express it.
Yeah. The first time I went to Brazil, she did not want to go. That's the last thing she wanted to do. I came back all excited. I was telling her all these things, and she didn't want to hear it. It was like, So, and so I said, look, you got to go with me on this next trip. So the second trip I went. She didn't go. The third trip, I said, okay, you got to go. And she said, no. She said, wait, we don't have the money and all this stuff. And she said, well, okay, if the money comes in, I'll go. So the money just poured in. I mean, more than enough. And it was like, and even actually just a few days before we went, she said, can I give my ticket to somebody else? I don't want to go. So anyway, so we get down there, and that was when I had those experiences that I wrote about in my book, Open My Eyes, Lord. Well, of course, she was right there with me the whole time as all these things were happening. But before we went, it was a real difficult season for the church that I was pastoring, in so many ways. So I was desperate. I mean, I was really crying out to God, and she was too, in a little different way. And I think that's why she was fighting it so hard. Well, when these things began to happen to me, it was like, well, if he can have it, I can have it. I mean, and so she started pressing in for it, and she started going for it. And so literally, maybe 3 or 4 days after that experience, we were in Rio de Janeiro, and she looked, and God opened her eyes. She saw an angel behind somebody up in the balcony of this church. It was like he had his hands laid on him, and God gave her insight as to what he was doing, that he was bringing healing, and even what he was doing. So she wanted to test this thing out. So she called that person down. I mean, had somebody go get that person. The person came. The person felt the angel, all of the everything she saw. It was exactly right. And so from that moment on, she was totally activated in all of this, almost simultaneous to me.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I wasn't aware of all that. I knew that she saw as well. And so you went on 2 trips before these encounters happened.
Yeah, it was the third time. Yes.
It was the third time. Okay, so you were just seeing healing miracles mainly on the first 2 trips, and that's what was getting you excited to keep going.
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
The first time I went with Randy Clark to Brazil, I went out of curiosity. I wanted to know, I was tired of telling other people's stories.
Yeah.
And I thought, I need to, because I was hearing all these things, and I want to see firsthand if this stuff is real. So I went out of curiosity. I didn't have a heart for Brazil, could care less. It was the only time I was ever going to go there, and I was there, just a few days. God just broke my heart for Brazil, the Brazilian people. Right off the bat, I just saw all kinds of miracles happening, and I was hooked. So I've been there, I don't know, close to 30 different times, and ministered all over the country from one end to the other, places that even a lot of the Brazilians never even heard of. So it was quite a journey.
Wow, that's great. Okay, go ahead, Sarah.
This is more of a situational type question. So how did you feel when you first saw a demon? And what was your thought process, and how did you deal with it?
Well, as I've shared in my book and on Sid Roth and other times, I have, for me, the first 30 days when Dennis Kramer prophesied over me and the gift opened up, everything I was seeing was so vivid and so real. See, a lot of people, they have this perspective like, I want to see for real. I want to see like with my natural eyes. Technically, if you have spiritual eyes in your spirit and you have natural eyes in your head naturally, seeing the spirit realm with your natural eyes is like having the wires crossed. It's not supposed to be like that all the time, but it happens sometimes, and that makes you aware. It's like that sovereign experience that picks you up and makes you aware that you can see, and then usually it switches back to seeing with the eyes of your spirit. And so that crossing of the wires is really what I was feeling the first 30 days. And so it was almost hard to distinguish whether this thing is standing in front of me for real or in the spirit during those 30 days. So it was overwhelming for sure. And I was seeing more than demons. I was seeing items lodged in people. So when you're seeing people who have a sword stuck in them, a spear, a big meat hook, a fishing hook, like things like that just lodged in people, and old looking wounds, like this happened a long time ago and it's still stuck there, and you have nothing to explain this. There's no book you've ever read, you've never heard anyone talk about it, you're just totally overwhelmed. And so for me, I didn't want to be around anything. I tried to stay home and away, and it was a process of learning what to do with that and how to pray with people and how to take those things out and how to bring healing. Because really they're spiritual representations of things that have happened to our spirit. It's not a literal thing, it's a picture that gives you information. It's a way to get a word of knowledge or a word of wisdom. And so with that, when I saw, I'm trying to remember the first. That's the challenge. Just trying to remember the first. I think one of the earliest that I can think of is when I was driving, and I remember pulling into the driveway of my parents' house where I was living. I was still single when this all first started, and so I'm living at home, about 19 years old, and I pull the car in, and suddenly I see this thing on the hood of the car. And so I parked the car, sitting there looking through the windshield, and there's this giant lizardy looking, reptilian looking thing on the hood of the car. It looks like a person, but the skin and just gross and intimidating and scary, and it's on the hood of the car, and it's looking at me, and it's not doing anything aggressive other than just being there, but it's overwhelming. And I fortunately had turned the car off, so I didn't do anything dangerous or foolish, but I jumped out of that car so fast. But something kicked in for me that was not like, for me, I jumped out of the car, and I'm standing next to the car, and I'm looking at it, and it's like, okay, I'm not sitting in the car, I'm standing next to the car, I'm looking at this thing, and then it was like authority settled in. And I was able to, okay. And I started commanding the thing to go in Jesus' name, and I'm yelling at it, and I'm by myself, but I'm just standing in the driveway screaming at my car. I want to watch the video of that in heaven someday. Jonathan's blooper reels of life. And but I'm standing there screaming at the hood of my car, and it jumps off the hood and it backs up a little bit, and then I'm like, it's working. So I went forward toward it, and I yelling at it some more, and it starts moving back, and I do it some more, and I'm like, oh, okay, this works. And so it was, for me, even the first experience was a learning experience right away about authority and identity. And it was just something that settled, but it's grown so much too, because I'm not going to get the chance to share this during this conference in a teaching setting, so I'll just share the idea, because a lot of people have this concept that greater levels equal greater devils, meaning that the higher you go up in your spiritual walk, you should have so much more spiritual warfare going on. And the concept all the time, well, oh, you're the seer, you must be like wrestling with principalities all night long. And I sleep pretty well, but so my thought that I've come to understand about this is that if you start out as a believer and you've only been a believer for 6 days and you're at like level 1, let's say, we'll just put some numbers on it, then any demon level 1 through 10 can come in and mess with you. But 6 months down the road in your walk into your identity and your authority, you might be walking as a level 3, and demons on level 1 and 2, they don't want to show up when you're around. So that stops happening. And then as you go 6 years and 60 years down the road, and now you're at a level 5 or a level 8, and this is so arbitrary, but it's just trying to put into language for us your progression in your growth of identity and authority, that as you grow in that identity and you're operating on an 8, demons 1 through 7, they don't want to show up when you're around. And there's only so many 8s, 9s, and 10s. So warfare actually, it has moments that are very, very intense, but they're much further and less frequent. And so that's what I've found. What would you guys add to that? Because your experience is similar, different?
I think the devil just loves to shout a lot as well. And so I think it's just always learning how to remind yourself in new ways of learning how to walk in authority and things like that. And maybe it's not always that, a lot of people, I heard that a lot as well, greater, higher level, higher devil kind of thing as well. And what do you say to that? But it's like, I think it's more so the revelation of identity is you're always growing in it. There's always new ways. I think if the Lord let you only use one way to use your authority, it would be very minimal to how vast your identity is in Christ. And so sometimes he doesn't always allow you to use the same road twice, if that makes any sense. He's always growing you in ways. He's always adding weapons to your arsenal, and always teaching you in ways of, the ways of warfare, so to speak. And it's not so much that I don't know. You're always growing in who you are, and who you are is this incredible, child of God who can do so much in the Spirit. And I've seen, being at Bethel, I've seen little kids walk up and someone prays, nothing happens. The kid comes up, prays, person gets healed. And being an adult, you're like, I fail at life. Like when you see that, you're like, what am I doing with my life? This little kid is so much further than me. And so, but it's just identity. And I think the Lord is just trying to teach you identity. And so sometimes if you're going through a hard time, just say, Lord, what are you showing me about my identity in this season? What are you teaching me about my identity in this season? Are you teaching me that I'm more valuable than I thought I was? Are you teaching me that I'm stronger than I thought I was? Are you teaching me that I actually have wisdom in my heart and I can give advice? Are you teaching me that I'm a powerful person and I can lay hands on the sick and pray for miracles? What are you teaching me? Because sometimes it isn't always the same thing twice, and it can be different things. And so it always, the way the Lord designs your life is he always designs it for you to come back to him every time. if he designed it one way, eventually you would make a formula and you would never see him again, and you would just keep on using that tool to hack away at, the problems of life. But he's always updating your tools. And, come home and I'll tell you what tool to give you next. And while you're here, let's have some dinner. It's always relationship. And I think that is, I don't want to even say half the battle. That's all the battle right there, is just finding out who you are and finding out who you are in the Lord.
I would want to add on to that. People ask me all the time, oh, you must be battling with the demonic all the time. And I'm like, the battle's already done. Jesus already won it all on the cross. I haven't got to, fight that stuff. God gave me authority over that stuff because of what he did on the cross. It's already done. And all I got to do is, walk up and be like, oh, excuse me, you know that you don't belong here right now because I'm here. And when I'm here, you don't belong here. So I'm always, that's probably one of the asked questions that I get. People oh, you must stay up all night fighting principalities. And I'm like, no, I stay up all night encountering God and the angelic. And by doing that, I'm fighting the enemy. The battle's done with the enemy at the same time. There's no way of, I don't differentiate. I'm I encounter God, and by doing that, defeat the enemy. That's the best way to defeat the enemy, is just through worshiping God, through focusing on God, and through focusing him, because it drives the devil crazy. And he just freaks out. So, yeah.
Well, I'll go ahead and ask you that kind of on with that. You were talking about what you saw in people at first and how it was representation of, their spirits being wounded in the past and things that haven't healed. This is one of the most commonly asked questions, but when you're praying for someone and you don't see anything happen, you don't hear anything, you don't see something, change or no healing or anything, what do you do?
So for the SBS students, one of the books that I assigned was Heal Them All. Heal Them All by Cheryl Shang. Now, I've read a whole lot of books on healing. Having traveled and ministered so much with Randy Clark for years, we have come across lots of healing books. And one of the things I like about that one is that the goal of the author is not just to move you from being someone who doesn't believe in healing to believing in healing, but to take people that believe in healing and say, why don't we see it 100% of the time? Why is there any kind of disconnect here? And Cheryl very much goes after that. And I fully believe it's always God's will to heal. Always. There's no question about that in my mind. Now, at first, I was really offended when I heard Cheryl say that, because my mom had fibromyalgia and had all those kinds of illnesses. And so I was always bothered by that at the very beginning, because it was like, well, then why didn't he heal, the most holy person I know, which is my own mother? And that offense held me back from the truth that it's always God's will to heal. So first of all, I don't create a doctrine when somebody doesn't get healed. When I don't see something happen, it's like the disciples are praying for the epileptic boy and he doesn't get healed. Jesus comes along and rebukes them for their faith being lacking. But I have, really the perspective that if Jesus hadn't shown up within a couple minutes, they probably would have created some sort of doctrine like, well, it's not God's will to heal your son, or, maybe there's a secret sin in your life, or maybe there's unforgiveness, or maybe there's this, and they would have created all the stuff that we now have inside of our theology. When in reality, it's always God's will to heal, in the same way that it's always God's will to save, that none would perish. But people still perish. So does God's will not happen sometimes? Absolutely. Of course. If you read the Bible, it's so obvious. God has a desire, but it doesn't always happen, because he allows us this freedom within this structure to make choices, even bad ones. If you don't have freedom to make bad choices, you don't actually have freedom. So he allows enough freedom for things, for other choices to be made. And so with that concept, the first thing I don't do is give excuses. It's like, I don't know why you didn't get healed. I just don't know. I don't know the issue here. But I'm not going to blame God. I'm not going to put a guilt trip on you. And I'm going to step back for a minute and look at this. Because one of the things is, so often we get stuck in a healing model. It's like, this is how we do it every single time. And you'll get a certain amount of success within that. But when you actually look at what Jesus did, he's doing it different every time. He tells this guy, be it unto you according to your faith. He tells this one, roll up your mat, pick it up and walk. He tells this one, go wash in the pool. This one, he spits on him. This one, he takes the blind guy, walks him out of town. It's different every single time. And what I get from that picture is that Jesus is only doing what he sees the Father do, and a part of that is always getting a rhema, getting a prophetic inclination of what he needs to do in this moment. And that does not mean taking 20 minutes, I got to get a word for you. They're standing in front of you, you prayed. I usually start by praying with authority. I just take authority, I command you to be healed. Are you healed? No? Why not? That's the next question. If you're not healed right away, that's when I step back and go, okay. Because usually, a lot of them, I'd say, you guys might have a different number, but I'd say at least 40 to 50% will be healed just by commanding it because of authority. And after that, then the question, okay, Holy Spirit, what's going on? Now I'm going to pray again in a moment, but why didn't they get healed the first time? And then he can start to bring some other information like, sometimes it's getting them to do something. So Jesus says, roll up your mat, pick it up, and walk. He doesn't just say, get up and walk. There's something that they need to activate their own heart to get involved. So you got a problem with your leg, stand up, take 10 steps, come back to me, and by the time they get back to you, they're healed. It's a participation in the miracle. That happens a lot. That's a big one. Having them test it out, as we just say. Just test your body out. Meaning do something that you couldn't do without it causing pain. Try that thing out. Move the arm, move the leg, whatever it is that needs to be checked out. That will cause healing very often because now they are participating with their faith instead of just being a passive person. And then sometimes it is something, seeing one of those objects stuck in someone and saying, okay, I see this, and it says unforgiveness on it, and we're just going to pray right now, and we're going to release forgiveness, and I think it came from your aunt, and there was some hurtful stuff, and we're just going to forgive her right now. And I won't usually even ask for confirmation of what I just said. I'll just lead them through it real quick, and then, so, is it gone? Is the pain gone where we just prayed? Yeah. Because if they get all in their head, like, well, my aunt when I was 4 years old done this and this and this, it totally gets detracted. It just gets side railed. And I'm saying, no, just I'm going to pray with you, and then you're going to check it out again, and that usually will kind of turn the whole thing, but not getting sidetracked with it. So there's so many answers to that question. And that's why the answer I really go to is going back to the Lord when you don't get the instantaneous and saying, what do we need to do here? What's the missing piece? So
very good. I guess we'll go to Gary now and kind of go opposite.
Sure.
You teach about seeing, and with seeing also comes the symbolism of what you see. So what are some good ways for people to go about learning about symbolism and understanding what they see a little bit more?
I think that's a really good question, too. There are a lot of books that will say this means that, and this means that, and this means that. And that's good. Oftentimes it does, and to some people it does. There are different cultures, different backgrounds, different life experiences. That one thing may mean to me may mean something totally different to you. So the Holy Spirit is the best dream or vision interpreter in terms of symbolism and what's happening. And I believe that there is a true gifting in that. I personally don't have it. Bob Jones is a real good friend of mine. We minister together a lot, and he'll have people sometimes stand up and they'll share a vision or dream or some supernatural experience that they had. And so while they're talking, I'm thinking, how would I answer that? And I have a tendency to do the cookie cutter thing. Well, this means that. Well, that means this and that means that. And then they get through, and then Bob says some of the most off the wall, it seems like, where did he get that? And the person that he's talking to that just shared that vision or whatever it was, they're just shaking, they're crying, the Spirit of God's all over them. I mean, he's nailing it exactly. Okay? So you can't put this stuff in a box. It's different with everybody. What's symbolic to me may not be to you or somebody else, because we look at things through our own lenses, and somebody else is seeing through a totally different thing. So, I don't know. I do know that as we press in for what the interpretation of these things are, God will show you. I mean, it's true. And generally, like if you have a vision or you have a dream or whatever, and you write it down, you have an inkling of what it may mean. Go with that. Because that's usually right. It's usually your first impression about it. But we argue with ourselves. We try to talk ourselves out of it. So anyway, God will bring the revelation to you as you seek Him, as you pursue Him. Peter was on the housetop. The sheet came down. Rise, Peter, kill and eat, and it's full of animals. No way, Jose, I'm not going to do that. Okay? He didn't understand that. He didn't have a clue. It went against everything he ever knew. He was greatly perplexed, the Bible says, about what this meant. But he sought God. It took him 3 days, and then he finally understood. Hey, this is for the Gentiles too. You see, so if we seek God for the revelation of the interpretation, we'll get it.
That's great. This is the last question that we have, so we're kind of going to be ending up here, and I guess we'll end up with Louise. What is the key to you to seeing in the Spirit as open and consistently as you see physically?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I would say a huge part of that is not putting God in a box and kind of being like, this is how God does it with me. This is how I see. Because I feel like every time I've ever done that, I've always seen a different way. Because almost like God is like, no, I don't. I should do like this. And then it changes. And I'm constantly reminded not to do that. Because I think when you don't do that, when you don't think, okay, this is what God does, this is who He is, like you put yourself in a box too. And you put yourself in a box of how you could see or how you could do this or how you could do that. I think that's a huge key for me. And I always keep reminding myself, don't ever put myself and God in a box. But constantly remind myself that like God can do outside of that. And even if I don't understand it, even if I don't really know what's happening, that like that can happen. And God can do it. And giving God permission too. And be like, hey, God, you got permission to do anything you want with me. Show me crazy, weird stuff, and that's okay. Like, I want that. Like, I want you to show me crazy, weird stuff. Like, I was like, I'll be that girl that you can show the weirdest things to, and I'm not going to reject it. I'm not going to push him away, but I might not understand it. I told God, I was like, I can't promise I understand it, but I will always look at what you're showing me, and I will never ignore anything, and I will always keep my eyes fixed on what you're doing. And I never want to ignore anything just because I don't understand it, or because I don't get it, or because it seems really weird, or like just really far out there. And I'm like, oh God, I didn't think God did that. Just never, ever let my mind get to that place when I think, oh, this is how God just like, and I know that like scratching the surface with seeing. I know that I'm just like the first like inch of what there is, and there's so much. you know, and it's like I always want to learn. Like I always want to learn about seeing. Like I never want to get to that point when I'm like, okay, like I know everything there is to know, because I don't, and I know that I will constantly be learning. And I know that when we have kids, I'll be learning new stuff, and when we have grandkids, I'll be learning new stuff, and constantly learning new stuff until the day that Jesus takes me back to heaven, because there's just so much of it, and there's always like at Bethel, Chris Valentin's talking about, it's like always be teachable. No matter what age you get to, no matter what place you are in life, no matter if you're a senior pastor, whether you're traveling the world, whether you're in business, no matter what you're doing, always remain teachable, because God will always continually teach you if you're in that place. So that's a huge key for me.
So awesome.
Well, for our SBS students, thank you so much. This was really a fun opportunity to do something different this week. You still got teaching, but in a very different way to digest. And so I'm going to recommend, if you're in one of the satellite schools, that you take some time and connect with some other people this week and talk about some of the questions we didn't answer and some of the answers we gave and how they impacted you. And if you're an online student, we have the Facebook group that you can join, and we can have a bunch of chats going on in there as well. But we'd love to hear some more questions and have some more dialogue. We just covered as much ground as we could, and I think we hit an unbelievable amount of topics, and it's really wonderful to have the spouses too. Let's just have a hand for our speakers here. So, thank you so much, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.